Welcome everyone to our first digital Daytimer Speaker Series program. We're excited to host with us today Dr. Karen Dobkins with the topic Living with Grace and Mindfulness. This was an originally scheduled event that we had to reschedule to be on Zoom, so I thank you all for being with us today. This lecture is based on her experience working with people of all ages in a 2-day intensive mindfulness workshop titled Principles of Clarity. The workshop draws from a variety of disciplines, including Buddhism, neuroscience, positive psychology, and cognitive therapy. The focus is on how to live a life where our actions are aligned with our core values, get straight to the heart of the matter, identify the issues, discriminate between real threats versus the stories we tell ourselves, and move away from the shoulds and take responsibilities for our choices and not go into a victim mentality. Communicate these needs effectively, bring love, mindfulness, and compassion to all situations, and live wholeheartedly without apology. We're so excited for this session today, and we do keep our events to 1 hour, so I will throw it over to Karen, and we will get started. Thank you all for joining us.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Eileen, for setting this up and for the introduction. That was a mouthful. I know it's taken from my own bio. What is it that my course covers? And you read it out so beautifully. And if we just read it together, we'd all be like, okay, now I know what she does. But it's a lot. It's a mouthful. And we're going to try to cover some of it in this short lecture today. I'm going to put up some slides maybe in a moment, but without even starting with any slides, I'm going to try to look everybody in the eyes. I like seeing people. I've given different versions of this talk called Living with Grace and Mindfulness to many different groups over the last 6 years probably. And I try to go into these talks a little bit underprepared because I want to get right to like what's very real for me each time I talk to people. And I knew I was going to be talking to people at a Jewish temple in San Diego. And so I thought I might just right off the bat say that I grew up in what I would call a Woody Allen movie in New York. I'm a New York Jew, and there's many ways in which my childhood was like a Woody Allen movie. And if you've ever seen a Woody Allen movie, you know what I'm talking about. And there's some really wonderful things that I got from my culture, our culture, I should say. And I know it's a little different on the East Coast versus the West Coast. But one thing I learned that is a very valuable skill in my culture is to speak my mind. Nothing was left unsaid. If somebody was upset with you, they told you. If somebody needed something, they told you. There's a lot of ownership of requests, and that's a beautiful skill to be able to ask for things. Because, you know, not every culture has that. A lot of cultures are quite reticent. They sublimate their feelings, and to not feel like I had to sublimate my feelings as a kid was huge, that I could speak my mind. What did not come along with that skill was, I'm going to use the word right now, was grace. I wasn't really taught about how to gracefully and responsibly make requests and state my needs and state what I don't want and express myself. And I know that's a strong statement to open up with, and I'm owning it myself, not to impose on you to say that you don't have grace, because I don't know anything about any of your backgrounds. But it's taken me a long time to bring grace into my life. I think grace is a very interpersonal trait. There's 5 different ways you can ask somebody for a need to be met. I'll say it again, there's 5 different ways to ask somebody for one of your needs to be met. And I think it's really interesting that in general, kids grow up not learning how to speak, communicate effectively from a place of love and not demanding and not accusational. And I hope you can already understand what I'm talking about, because I'm sure everybody on this phone call has at some point in their life asked for something from someone else in a not so graceful way. I certainly have. So just as a placeholder for right now, the word living with grace, we're going to think of that as how to actually make responsible requests and express yourself, but using a graceful approach, something that I certainly never learned as a kid. The word mindfulness is the second part of the title, and that may be a little bit more of an intra-personal journey. And so I'll say more about mindfulness in a moment. If there's sort of two things I want to go over in this talk, is how to live with grace when it comes to interacting with other people, and how to live mindfully, which is a more internal process. I've been interested in this issue since I was a little kid. I think there were ways in which, when I was even very young, things were confusing to me because people were saying things, but they weren't saying it in a way that I could make a lot of sense of. And I'm going to give you an example just to start out with something kind of provocative. My mother, may she rest in peace, is an amazing woman. She's taught me so much about how to live my life, with purpose, with expression. My mother never walked away from a conversation, even when it was difficult. She always stayed in the game. And I made a lot of progress with my mom throughout my entire life because I wanted the communication to get cleaner and cleaner, which it did. But when I was a little girl, there were parts of my communication with my mother that I found confusing. So I'll give you this example. When I was growing up, my mother used to say to me, "You need to wear stockings to temple." And I never wanted to wear stockings because it was uncomfortable. I was a little girl trying to put on these tight stockings. It was the summer. I was hot. And I would say, "I don't want to wear stockings." And she'd say, "Well, you have to wear stockings." And I would say, "Well, why do I have to wear stockings?" And she'd say, "Because it's inappropriate to go into a temple with bare legs." Now, it's fine if you agree with my mom, but to tell a little kid it's not appropriate to go into a temple with bare legs, the kid still looks at you and goes like, I really don't understand that. It doesn't, And of course, parents, and I'm a parent of 3 teenagers, we do a lot of shortcuts. Like, we don't really want to sit and have a whole deep conversation. We just want our kids to know it's not appropriate to go into the temple with naked legs. Years later, I had some great conversations with my mom about that specific example. And I said to my mom as an adult, now able to form the question with my mother, "Mom, why did you tell me it was not appropriate for me to go bare-legged? Like, what was really going on for you when you said you have to wear stockings?" And she said, "Well, what was going on for me is this." And she gave me the answer. I was probably in my 30s at that point. And I was before I tell you what the answer was, I was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, thank you for making it really clear and gracefully telling me why you want me to wear stockings in temple. And it makes so much sense now." Okay, so you want to hear what she told me many years later? She said this. She said, "Well, Karen, I know I shouldn't care what people think of our family, but I do care what people think of us. And even though I know there's nothing actually wrong with legs that don't have stockings on them in the temple, I feel like other families will look at you and they'll judge you, and then our family will be judged, and I just don't want to be judged. So Karen, would you kindly put on the stockings, because I, as your mother, kind of worry about our family being judged." Now that's clear, honest communication, and it actually makes sense to me. It actually is a reason. So it's that level of communication that I'm asking for, that I'm trying to give to my own kids, that I want to have with you on this very phone call. Okay, so that's grace. I'm going to go right into mindfulness, and we'll come back to grace later. So, I don't know if I can get a show of hands because now I can't see everybody, but like who has heard of mindfulness? I'm just curious. Is this I see a bunch of hands go up. All right, it's become a very popular term. My laboratory, I'm a professor at UCSD, and my laboratory studies mindfulness and well-being. And we also study the general phenomenon of human suffering. Why do humans suffer so much? And of course, it's going to come as no surprise that mindfulness is really the flip side of suffering. You can choose to be mindful and not suffer so much, or be not mindful and suffer a lot. So in way of background, I'm sure most of you know this, but the notion of mindfulness originated 2,500 years ago with the Buddha, and has only recently become popularized in the 1990s, probably, starting with this fellow on the right named John Kabat-Zinn. He himself was a professor of molecular biology, and in the 70s, he got his own guru. He started practicing meditation, and he gave up molecular biology and moved his entire research focus over to mindfulness. And he's the one who created, if you haven't heard of it, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I'm about to put up the definition of mindfulness. It's paying attention on purpose to the present experience without judgment. So let me unpackage this. Paying attention on purpose means not just paying attention because right now you have to, like you're listening to me, you're presumably paying attention to me. But paying attention on purpose is a commitment to a lifestyle, to saying like, I'm gonna try to stay paying attention. Not only, there's different ways to talk about paying attention. Usually people think like, oh, I need to pay attention. Like if I'm driving, I should pay attention to the road. Sure, that's one version of mindfulness. There's also paying attention when somebody's talking to you, because it's very easy to get distracted in our own minds. And it's also paying attention to what's happening inside you, something that humans are not very good at. We'd rather distract ourselves with TV shows and whatnot than sink into our own self and see what's happening. So paying attention on purpose to the present experience is, I'm going to talk about ourselves, what's happening inside us. Like, what is happening inside me right now? Like, I can tell you right now, my heart's fluttering a little bit. There's a way in which, like, I didn't quite like the way I said that last sentence. And so I'm a little bit like, oh, I have a little bit of a reaction inside myself. Without judgment, that's the last piece. And that's probably the most important piece, which is that little fluttering I feel in my heart because I didn't quite say something the way I wanted to a moment ago. It's just a sensation. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything about me as a person. It just means that I have an experience, and it's called, like, let's say it's called embarrassment. It's going to go. It's not who I am. It's not permanent. And it's interesting. I can actually feel that feeling of like, with a sense of curiosity and with a lot of acceptance for being a human, which is hard because we have all of these reactions inside us all day long. So compassion, acceptance, allowance of the universe that's inside us that's changing all day long. That's mindfulness. Going to go a little bit further, which is I want to spell out the 3 wisdoms of mindfulness. Sometimes this slide says something else. Instead of saying the 3 wisdoms of mindfulness, sometimes it'll say the 3 principles of Buddhism, which is what it really is. But it doesn't matter because you can call it a wisdom, you can call it a practice, but it really does descend from Buddhism. And by the way, I don't know if you'll find this interesting, but a lot of, and I find this fascinating. I'm fascinated with my Jewish culture, and I'm also fascinated with Buddhism. And there's just a lot of Jewish people who also practice Buddhism. And there's a name for that. Does anybody know what we call that? It's like a certain thing. What do we call it? A Jubu. I see Bonnie's lips moving. So yeah, it's called a Jubu, right? So I'm kind of a Jubu. So what are the 3 principles or the wisdoms? The first one is impermanence. And when you hear the word impermanence, most of us, especially older, but some of us getting older, kind of go like, oh, I get it. I'm not here forever. I'm going to die one day. And I love talking about death, by the way. If you ever want me to come back, I have a death lecture that I like to give. So yeah, we're all impermanent. Even as my house overlooking the ocean, it's like, it's not going to be here forever. Things fall apart. People die, buildings fall. But I mean impermanence at a much deeper level than just the fact that I'm going to die one day. I mean the fact that all the things that we experience, that universe inside us, that little fluttering of my heart because I was slightly embarrassed, it comes and goes. It doesn't stay. It's not permanent. So to capture that, the Buddha said, praise and blame, gain and loss, pleasure and sorrow, come and go like the wind. To be happy, rest like a giant tree in the midst of them all. So like really feeling, there's a reason why we use the word grounded, because a tree is grounded. Its roots are in the soil. and wind comes and blows the tree around, and fall comes and the leaves fall off, and then, you know, spring comes and the flowers come back. And to really deeply understand that everything is in change, everything is changing, you're constantly changing, is the impermanence. And it's beautiful. And you don't have to try to make sense of everything all the time, except to just be like, ah, this is happening, but it's not here forever. So that's impermanence. The second principle or wisdom, this is the one that people sometimes struggle with the most. It's called not self. And here it's just that we have thoughts and emotions, but we are not our thoughts and emotions. Meaning our thoughts and emotions are experiences that we're having, but they don't define us. So what usually happens is, like, let's go back to my example where my heart started to flutter because I felt a little embarrassed that I didn't get the wording quite right. What we tend to do is we tend to think that that feeling, that emotion is all of a sudden like who I am. Like all of a sudden I am an embarrassed person. As opposed to like, no, I'm a human being and I experience this thing that's very common called embarrassment, but it's not who I am. Thoughts are even more dangerous because we think that we are our thoughts. And again, the first time I heard this years ago when I started practicing Buddhism in my like early 20s, and somebody said to me, Karen, you're not your thoughts. I was like, of course I'm my thoughts. That's exactly who I am. I'm in my head and I'm thinking, and that's me. Until you start to practice and realize, no, the thoughts are just experiences. You say a lot of things to yourself all day long. A lot of things to yourself all day long. Some of them not so pretty. And when you start to realize that that's not who you are, they're just thoughts that go in and out of your minds. Some of them are useful. Many of them are not useful. You suffer less when you deeply understand that. By the way, I saw a bumper sticker that said, don't believe everything you think. That really captures it. Like, don't believe everything you think. Now, can you guys guess why people get hung up on this number 2? What's the obvious question that you want to ask somebody when they point out number 2? Anybody want to say, like, what is it that people get hung up on?
Well, if we're not our thoughts and emotions, then who are we?
Exactly. That's exactly the question that gets asked. And it's $1 million question. And I'm going to save it for later if we come back to it. Because that's what most people say. Well, if I'm not my thoughts and emotions, then who am I? And then the third principle of mindfulness is the difference between pain and suffering. Pain, whether it's mental or physical, is a sensation. And it leads to suffering when we attach to it. Pain is very natural, again, physical or mental. But there's 2 ways we attach to our pain. And I'm going to give an example of emotional or mental pain. So one way we attach to our pain is we cling to it. So we didn't like the way somebody talked to us in the grocery store. And we sit there after we're back in our car driving home, and we keep thinking about it, and we keep playing it through our minds over and over, and each time we get a little bit madder because we go like, I can't believe, why were they rude to me? I was so nice to them. They misunderstood me. We cling, we just keep spinning on that emotional pain. And that's one way that we attach. And then the other way that we attach, which you might think, well, that doesn't sound like attachment, but it is we deny or avoid. If I had a dime for every time somebody said to me something like, oh, it doesn't bother me, it's okay, when it's clear that it's not okay. You know, people come to me with all these different situations. Like one situation might be, you know, my boyfriend didn't text me back when he said he was going to, but you know, it's okay, it's all right, it's okay, it doesn't bother me. And it's like, well, then why did you bring it up if it doesn't bother you? So humans are very good at saying something doesn't bother them when it does. Why? Because we have a lot of shame. We think we shouldn't feel offended or that we shouldn't feel hurt. If I had a dime for every time somebody said, well, you shouldn't be upset. You can't argue with somebody's experience. If somebody's upset, they're upset. So because we internalize that kind of idea, like I shouldn't be upset, we take something which is a feeling of pain, I am upset, and we just go, I shouldn't, and it's not there. And that's another way to attach to it, because guess what? If it stays inside you, it's in there. You're holding on to it. And what grace is about, especially when it comes to other people, is learning how to express that there is pain. You know, some people, some of the workshops that I've been a participant in, we hit pillows. We hit pillows to kind of be like, I'm in pain. There's something emotionally that's bothering me. It has to come up and out. It has to be honored. When it comes to another person, the skill of grace is learning how to relay your experience. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to this word, with grace. Grace means that there's no accusation. There's no assumptions that the other person meant to hurt you. I always like to say to people that when you tell the truth to someone else about your relationship with them, telling them the truth about your relationship with them is never about them. It's always about you. And that's hard to hear, because most people think like, you know, I'm going to talk to my husband. I'm going to tell him the truth. I'm going to tell him the truth. He is inconsiderate. He doesn't, you know, and it's like, no. The truth comes from you saying solely, I have a need of cleanliness that isn't being met. That's very different than saying to somebody, you're a slob. That's not where the truth is. The truth is, I have some need that isn't being met, which is a certain level of cleanliness. Are you willing to talk to me about this so that we can figure out what to do? Attaching to it is just saying, oh, it doesn't bother me that he's not that clean. It's okay. If it's not okay, it's not okay. There's just one more thing I want to say on this slide, which is, okay, let me go back actually, which is suffering is when we cling or deny our pain. And sometimes when I give a talk, I will use this example of physical pain. So I'll do this. It's hard to do this in front of you guys, but like if I were to hit my hand and it hurts, and pretty much almost every day, something's going to happen physically where it hurts. You know, you stub your toe, you move your body the wrong way, and you get a little twinge in your hip, whatever it is. Physical pain is almost a daily occurrence. So if I was feeling pain from hitting my hand, once I stopped hitting my hand, so this definitely hurts right now. But once I stop, there's no pain signal anymore. And you would all think me quite crazy if I sat here for the next 30 minutes describing the pain that I had a while back. If I said to you, oh my God, you know what? It really hurt before when I hit my hand. And I wonder why it hurt so much. And I wonder if I should have done that, or maybe it was kind of embarrassing that I hurt my hand in front of all of you. And it really hurt. It mostly hurt my pinky, but you'd all kind of look at me and go like, why are you still talking about the pain signal? It's not there anymore. But that's what we do with our emotions. You know, what happens is something annoys us, like we go to the grocery store and somebody speaks unkindly to us. And then we can spend the rest of the day replaying it and rethinking it, when you kind of go like, well, the pain signal isn't there anymore. So why are you still on it? Again, I like to use these examples because when I use examples, I hope that people in my audience kind of go like, yeah, I kind of do that, right? So just to round this out, another way that we suffer is not just clinging to our pain, but clinging to joy. So the example that I like to give is that, you know, sometimes there's joy in our life. Sometimes things feel wonderful. I had a great conversation with my kids at dinner the other night. And last night, not so much. Last night dinner was like pretty ho-hum. Nobody really wanted to talk. But if I was focused on the dinner that we had 2 nights ago, which was so much joy, and I cling to it, and I go like, come on, you guys, this is what we can have every night. It can always be like this. Well, I'm just going to suffer because I'm just going to be holding on to the joy when in fact the next night it's just not so joyful. I don't know why. Sometimes people are in sync, sometimes they're not. So I would encourage you to notice when you also cling to like, oh, things are so good, like so good right now. Don't anybody move an inch because things are good. They're going to change because that's the nature of the universe inside us. It's always changing. It's like weather. It'd be like saying, I want the sun to stay out all day and no clouds. That would be crazy because clouds come and go. And then the last thing I just want to say on this slide, and I don't know if this will be meaningful to you, but when I was younger and I was starting to practice these wisdoms, I used to think like, I knew I wanted to be grounded, coming back to the word grounded, like to be firmly in the ground. I thought that meant that I should stay very even keel. Like in my 20-year-old mind, what it would mean for me to be at peace would be like, I don't let myself get really excited and I don't let myself get really upset. That's not what being grounded is about. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Being grounded is, again, getting used to the weather changes inside us all day long. Sometimes things feel really good and connected, and sometimes you feel like, I feel kind of lonely and I don't know who to talk to, or I had a bad conversation with my son. Like, it's all part of this changing universe inside of us. So the goal here is not to stay, consistent and even keeled. The goal is to kind of ride with it and to not react and to not behave poorly on another person because we've been hurt, which is, the most common thing that we do is when we're in pain, we go like, "Rawr," to somebody else. So that's mindfulness in a nutshell. And this is really the part where I say it is tough being a human. And it's tough because, hearkening back to my childhood where I absolutely learned the skills of being loud and clear about what I needed. Nothing was sublimated. I was able to say, I want this, I think that. Is that we are part animal. We just are. I mean, I'm a scientist by training. I'm a neuroscientist by training. So I can tell you that humans share a lot of the same systems with animals. We have a very exquisite fear system like animals to protect ourselves. We have a very exquisite motivation system so that we can survive by getting food. We're motivated to eat, otherwise we would die. We're motivated to have sex, otherwise our genes would die and we wouldn't live on. We're just like animals in many ways. And at the end of the day, what I like to say is you're looking out for number one. Like any other animal, you're looking out for number one. It's just, we're selfish. It's just it's part of us as an animal. And again, it's great when you're able to express your needs. I have an animal with needs and I'm going to, I grew up in a Jewish family where I'm going to say like, I want pastrami on rye. Make sure you put a lot of mustard on it for me. Like that's very comfortable for me to say what I want because I learned that skill when I was young. I'm very able to look out for number one is what I'm saying. But the predicament that we're in is that we're not just animal. We're above animals. we have a metacognition. We're allowed to think about the fact that we have thoughts, which is no other animal has that. We're the only all animals can think. In other words, a dog can think, and thinking meaning that they see food and they go towards it, or that their master comes home and they go like ruff, ruff, ruff towards their master. That inquires thinking. Maybe not verbally thinking. Obviously, dogs don't have verbal cognition, but dogs think, just not in words. But what dogs don't have that humans have is that dogs cannot think about the fact that they have thoughts. We're the only animals that can do that. And with that ability in humans comes a responsibility, a divine-like responsibility to act with what I'll call right action. Sure, from a moralistic point of view, I'm more than happy to say, look, we have a divine-like responsibility to behave with right action because you can say, because God says so. I'm fine with saying because God says so, or because the Bible says so. I'm fine with that. But I'm going to actually go a little bit deeper, which is that we are social animals. We just are. So are monkeys and apes, but humans more than any other animal. We work in humongous groups of people. We're flexible. We cooperate in large numbers. We need each other. And I think it's simple logic that if we need each other and we thrive in community, which again, we're social animals, we thrive in community. I think it's simple logic to realize that if you want to get along with other people, you're going to have to find a way to manage this guy on the left. You're going to have to find some way to honor the fact that you're an animal who wants it the way you want it, but you want to have connections with other people. So there's going to have to be a way that we sometimes put our needs off to the side when someone else needs us. That we sometimes manage our needs in a way that doesn't impose on somebody else. That we express our needs to another person with grace and honor. So it's not about eliminating the guy on the left who's out for number one. It's about learning how to make responsible requests of other people to live with grace. So I lead workshops, like Eileen said, and I'm happy to run one for this group. It's usually a 2-day workshop. I like to work in groups of 20 to 30. And I liken it to going to the gym. So we all would agree that if you want biceps, if you want strong biceps, well, then you go to the gym, let's say, I don't know, 2-3 times a week. You wouldn't just go to the gym like once a year to get biceps. We all understand that to have a healthy body, you have to put in a regular workout, right? Well, I'm going to say it's exactly the same thing when it comes to your own personal growth. Both intra and interpersonal growth requires that you work out regularly. It's a commitment to a lifestyle. And so I show you this girl running. It's like if anything that I'm saying in today's lecture rings true to you, that you'd like to practice more grace in your interactions with others, that you'd like to practice more mindfulness so that you suffer less, well, to see the results, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to practice. And I give people tools on how to practice. And one of the things I like to use in my coaching, or because I take individual clients also, and I also work with groups, is I use this idea of interval training. If you join a track team and you join the track team as a sprinter, even if you're a sprinter on the track team, the coach will have you run long distance. And even if you're a long distance runner on the track team, the coach will have you practicing sprints. And the reason is because the coach knows that there's both fast twitch and slow twitch muscle, and the coach wants you to have a rounded experience of all of the possibilities that your muscles have. Then you get to choose. Are you going to actually focus on running fast or running long distance? So again, if you can kind of picture this idea of muscles being able to do lots of different things, and a good coach is going to show you all the different possibilities. It's the same thing with being a human. One of my favorite exercises in my workshop is I have you practicing being a really dramatic, me-focused, accusatory, victim person. Like I really have people stand up and play into that. Like tell us a story from a position of victimhood, of everybody else is wrong, of how it's so horrible. Because I want people to experience that very human thing that we do. The non-clearness, the blaming, the drama. And then I have people experience the opposite, which is to tell a story again about, let's say, a conflict or someone that you've judged negatively from like a place of real compassion for the person. Not pitying the person, but real compassion, which is seeing that the other person's just like you. Because anytime you point a finger at somebody else, whether it was someone who was rude to you in the grocery store, or somebody who didn't give you something that you asked for, you can relate to it. Because I guarantee you that there's been some point where you've been a little rude to somebody at a grocery store, in a restaurant, or whatever it is. And you might go, yeah, well, I'm only rude because like I'm in a rush, or I'm only rude because they were rude to me first, or I'm only rude because I didn't get sleep last night. I mean, you can list 10 reasons why people think it's okay for them to be rude, but not other people. And once you sort of understand that rudeness is just one of the traits that humans have, It's just one of them. And of course, it comes in different levels and different people. But once you sort of start to understand, like, there's, almost 8 billion people on this planet, all wanting what they want, all fighting for resources in a sense, you start to have a lot more compassion. And you can start to really look at something from a completely different, with a different muscle is the way I would describe it, with a different muscle in your body. And it doesn't mean that you always have to, in real situations, act with compassion. I mean, that's the goal. But at least if you practice compassion, possibly in forums that you set up for yourself, like you could each go home tonight and meet with your spouse and say, you know what, I want to actually practice making a responsible request where I ask you for one of my needs to be met, where I ask you from a position of, it's not your problem, it's mine. Sweetheart, I have a need for the house to be quite clean. And I think you might have a lower threshold than me, or a higher threshold than me in terms of dirtiness. And I'm just wondering, can we come up with some plan where I end up feeling comfortable? That's making a responsible request. Versus, and then saying to your husband, now can I play into or your wife or husband, like, now can I play into the other version, which is just full of drama? Like, have fun with it. And your spouse might go, all right, bring it on. And you might go, you know what, you're a slob and you are the reason why I come home every day and I'm unhappy because this house isn't what I want it to be. And why aren't you taking, like allow yourself to see the different ways to be. And that's interval training. And then breathe through the discomfort picture of a person in a yoga pose, because what we tend to do is when we get uncomfortable, we open up the refrigerator for something to eat, is a good analogy. And there's a way in which if you're willing to just sit with whatever it is that's uncomfortable, not only will you build up your own emotional resilience, you'll realize, like, I am strong enough to deal with this discomfort, but it will shift. It won't stay, because when you honor it, it just needs to be, it's almost like, think of discomfort as this little voice in you going like, I'm uncomfortable. And if you can like look at it and go, I hear you, you're uncomfortable, I see you. There's a way that discomfort goes like, all right, thanks a lot. Thank you for noticing me. I just needed you to notice me. And now I can be on my way. But when you don't accept the discomfort, when you go for the distraction over the discomfort's just still going like, hey, you still haven't noticed me. I'm here. It lingers when you don't pay attention to it. With yourself, and if you want to have a good relationship with others. So to give you an idea of topics that are covered, how you listen to and change what you say to yourself. One of the things I have people practice, like, okay, this is one of my favorite things. You can start doing this today. My head gets really full of thoughts sometimes, and it's not a good place to be. Like sometimes I'm so caught up in all these different thoughts about something. Like if I were to hire a therapist who talked to me the way my mind talks to me, I would fire them. I'd be like, you're schizophrenic and you're not saying anything that makes sense. So one of the parts of my practice, and I teach this to people, is like, it has to come up and out, all of that crazy monkey mind stuff. So if I'm taking a walk, I'll turn on voice note and I'll literally just do a stream of consciousness of what my mind is saying to me. Because if you don't let it out, it's going to sit in there and fester, and you're going to start to think that those thoughts are true. But when you literally just walk and talk, or you can sit and talk, or you can journal it, all of a sudden, it's more like an experience that you're having and no longer the truth or who you are. So that's one thing you can think about. Another one is accepting all of you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's really important to say this. I do a lot of work on what I call the shadow side. If you know who Carl Jung is, he was a contemporary of Freud. And Carl Jung and also Freud understood that humans have a shadow side, a dark side, the bad, the ugly, the selfish side, the side that just wants it the way you want it. It's like, we're animals. Like, no dog waits for another dog to eat the food first. Of course, if you put down a plate of food and there's 3 dogs, all dogs would try to get to it first. It's just what dogs do. It's what animals do. You put yourself first. So those, those analysts, therapists in the 1800s understood that humans have this very ugly, bad, call it what you want. And it can come in very small amounts or big amounts. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't shame it. And I do a lot of work on shame because there's so many ways in which we don't accept all of us because we're ashamed of the bad, of the ugly. But until you do the shadow work on yourself and you're willing to go like, yeah, I can be selfish sometimes. I can be impatient sometimes. Then you haven't really fully practiced self-love. And this is the part in the lecture where I look you all in the eyes and I say, this doesn't give you permission to behave poorly. Very important, because sometimes people can misunderstand when I say that you need to honor your shadow side. It doesn't mean that you go, Karen Dobkins told me, you know what, I need to honor my shadow side, so I'm going to cut in front of people in line because I'm going to honor the fact that I want to go first. No. It's about not shaming that desire to go first and then acting appropriately or accordingly or lovingly or connectedly or considerately, fill in the blank. That's a choice. But I would go so far to say that you don't even realize that you have the choice to act with right action until you understand that you do have a little gremlin inside you who just wants things the way you want things. So that's what I mean about accepting it all. Practicing emotion resilience. This is about accepting all the states, all the emotions that we have. It's kind of what I was talking about in the first part of my talk. Like, throughout my day, I sometimes feel a little down. Sometimes I feel a little bit like hopeless in the middle of the day, or feel a little bit like, low energy. And then sometimes I feel like really connected with somebody and I feel like I'm on top of my game. And it's just like, it's learning how to ride this ebb and flow of being a human, because all day long, these experiences of different emotions and feelings come up. And I just want to give a shout out to meditation and yoga, both of which I practice. Meditation is the formal practice. So you can sit even for 2 minutes in the morning and practice a meditation. And if you want me to lead a meditation in the question and answer period, I'm happy to. But really, the meditation that you practice for 2 minutes a day, 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day is meant to take you into the rest of the day. It's learning how to sit with your monkey mind and not let it run the show. And then the last thing is your relationship with others. And there's 2 things that I talk about here. One is practicing compassion. And I've already talked to you about compassion. It's not about pitying other people. It's about actually having compassion. So when somebody cuts you off in the grocery store, instead of being like, oh my God, that's a jerk, he's a jerk, you can instead kind of go like, oh, I know what it's like to cut people off, like either accidentally or because I start to walk a little faster than other people so I can get in front because I'm in a rush, whatever it is. You just sort of have a deeper understanding that we all have the good, the bad, and the ugly in us. This is where I stare into the camera and I say, this doesn't mean that you let people walk all over you. That's a different topic. If somebody cuts you off in the grocery store, it's totally fine to say to them, excuse me, I don't know if you know this, but I was next in line. But it's how you say that. It's the how of it, not the what. It's how you say to somebody, excuse me, I don't know if you noticed, but I was next. One version, I'll do the drama, is like, you meant to cut me off and you are a cut offer and I'm not. And that's the difference between you and me. Versus the other way to say it, which comes from I know it can be kind of hard to know who was next, and sometimes I'm not paying attention. And there's so much compassion in this other version where you say to somebody, oh, excuse me, sir, I don't know if you saw, but I was next in line. So compassion, and then taking responsibility for conflict with others. Oh boy, this is usually the longest segment of my workshop because we're not very good at it. We're very good at assuming that the other person is at fault, that the other person is wrong, that if it wasn't for the other person doing X, Y, and Z, everything would be great. But once you start to learn that you have contributed, that's where all the power is. So I am looking at the time, and I want to stop to make sure there's enough time for questions, and you've got kind of a whirlwind tour of all of this, and would love to hear what you think. Martha's hand is up. Oh no, that's a clap actually. That's a clap. Okay, thank you. I don't know, Eileen, if you want to
I'm going to scan
take
the
the
room and
questions
see.
for me, or if I should call on people who have their hand up. I can open up participants and do it like.
Let's do that. I'm unmuting myself and I'm looking at the gallery view.
I'm sorry, Eileen, can you say that again? Okay.
If people want to use the raise hand function, that would be best, or unmute yourself and we can find you.
Bonnie's hand is up. Bonnie, you're up.
Bonnie,
Okay.
go for it.
Okay, I've never thought of this before. I was really struck by what you were just talking about, standing in line in the grocery store, which I haven't done in 9 weeks, and I may never do it.
Right.
Online shopping. Well,
Right.
it occurred to me that sometimes we manage any kind of situation like that, but that was a really good one to picture. Out of embarrassment, we come across as more harsh. If we're
Say more about your embarrassment in that situation.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say something to that other person. So instead of doing it the way you just did, I could picture doing it with not a nice look on my face and not meaning that, but forgetting to pay attention as you're suggesting. And by the way, if you saw me going in and out, I'm having all this trouble with my Wi-Fi. So who knows?
Yeah. All right.
Anyway,
We'll
that's just please reflect on that.
Well, I think it's interesting that you chose the word embarrassment. I mean, it's an interesting, if you were my client, we would spend some time on your choice of that word because it's meaningful to you that you picked the word embarrassment. You're right. So we would just have to do the work, you and I, where I say, well, why does it feel like embarrassment? Can you tell me more about embarrassment? And then, I mean, I'm not going to put you on the spot right now because these are your peeps and I wouldn't do that to you. But I could imagine somebody might say, well, it's like, I'm not saying this is you, Bonnie, but like somebody might say, well, it's embarrassment because I feel like I shouldn't be asking for things of other people. For example, I'm looking at you. I would let, if you want to offer more about your.
I clearly chose that word, and I'm also interested, and I'm going to do some thinking about that. Barry and I will be talking about that as soon as
right. I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. But I think my point was more, if you're not in the most real, authentic place, you go sideways.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's just the whole life. There's so many life lessons in what you say. Anyway, that's I think what.
Okay, so thank you for saying that. So if you aren't present to what's happening inside you, it's very easy to go sideways. And I do it a fair amount because I just do. I know the skills, but in the moment, I forget my skills and I go sideways. Yeah. That's why the cleanup is extra special. I love cleaning up. It's one of my favorite things to do, whether it's with an agent on the airline, on the phone with an agent for the airlines or with my son. So the cleanup is my favorite part, meaning that after it comes out wrong the first time, you get to say, you know what, that didn't come out right. I apologize. Can I try that again? And the person on the other end is like, oh my God, that woman actually apologized to me and she did it right the second time. It is a beautiful thing to do that. Yeah. A real gift.
And easier to do it, obviously, for example, with the person I live with, right. And I think of all kinds of, opportunities that Barry and I avail ourselves of to go back to that 5 minute ago conversation and say, you know what, this is what was going on. Harder to be that quick in the grocery store. But anyway, Thank you.
And you know what else, though? I want to take it even one step further, which is that even in times when I didn't in the grocery store do the cleanup, I still go home and in my heart and mind do the cleanup. And it's not that that person necessarily experiences it, although some people might say they do if you kind of believe in that stuff. But like, at least you do the cleanup and you can reflect back and kind of be like, you know, I'm sorry, you know, it's very valuable. Good. Thanks, Bonnie. Who else wants to? I see a hand up. Diana's hand is up. Actually, hand is up. Her real hand is up.
And we also have a question in
Do
the
you want to
chat.
unmute Diana? I can do it too. Hold on. Oops. All right. Oh, well, let's do Diana first. I just unmuted her, and then we'll do the chat question. Sorry.
Oh, you can hear me, Karen?
I can, Diana. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm reminded of an experience I had some time ago when we talk about compassion. I was shopping at a department store, and the clerk who waited on me was very rude and very short with me. So I said to her, "Gee, I'm sorry. It seems like you're having a bad day today."
Mm-hmm.
And then she melted.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started to tell me, I don't remember now what all she said, but what had happened earlier, I can't remember what it was. But she just melted. And I said, well, I'm very sorry. And then we carried on my purchase. But would you call that compassion?
Absolutely. And I've done that too, and it goes a long way.
Yeah.
It really does. So thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful thing to say to somebody. It's like, you know, how are you doing? Okay. Maybe, are you having a bad day today? But the thing about the how in that one is it can't come from like I'm better than you. You know, it has to really be a heartfelt, like we're on the same level here. And boy, yeah, sometimes I'm in a bad mood too.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Good. Thank you. Should I look at the chat myself? Let's see. There's a clanking noise. I do not hear. How can you own your emotions while also understanding that you are not your emotions? That's a beautiful question. When you understand that emotions are experiences, then you can put some distance between you and them because they're not you. They're just an experience. And there's almost always, like I'm going to be like a cheerleader right now, there's almost always something to learn from your emotions, especially when they're negative. So if you can start looking at your emotions like with curiosity, like this is really interesting. I'm going to keep going back to that example early in my talk where I didn't say something quite the right way and I got a little nervous and embarrassed. You know, there's just a moment of honoring like, oh, I'm a human who I might give lots of talks, but I sometimes feel insecure, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way we are as humans. So I would just use the word curiosity to start to look at your emotions with curiosity and sort of understand they're just an experience that probably is telling you something about yourself or about maybe a way to do something differently next time. Like, to tell you the truth, what happened was I got self-conscious early on because I think I heard one of my sons and I couldn't give you all of me. So probably next time I make one of these Zoom calls, I'll be like very clear to my kids, like please don't distract me, you know? So I learned something. Does that help a little bit? Okay, it says thank you. Let's see. Somebody said thank you. Could you pinpoint the 5 different ways to ask for something with grace? Well, the 5 different ways may or may not be graceful. I was just saying, like, in any particular request, there's ways to make a request that's graceful and ways to make a request that's not so graceful. And I think that really the first step is understanding that it's your need, it's not the other person. I'm sorry, but just use cleanliness in a household as an example. Almost no 2 people have need the same level of cleanliness. It's very easy for the person who likes it cleaner to call the other person a slob. Like, you can play with that in yourself, like play with like, oh my God, I've been calling my husband a slob. It's his fault. He's inconsiderate. You know, see what that feels like when you just tell the other person that they're wrong versus the graceful way to make the request, which is, it's me. It's me. I have a need and I want to tell you about the need because I'm wondering if there's something you can do to help me with the need. And that's where grace is. Grace is owning that it's your need. it's nothing wrong with the other person. I mean, seriously, I think the most common human thing that we do is we make the other person wrong. And then we ask our friends to agree with us, you know, and our friends go, oh yeah, you should tell him he's a slob. It's like, whoa, wouldn't it be good if your friend helped you learn how to make a responsible request? So that's how I would think about it. So does the Christian concept of grace as coming from above work into this? Boy, that's a big question. I also like to give lectures on parenting, and something that I think about a lot is how to love our children with God's love, with the grace of God's love, unconditionally. So I think there's a grace in the moment that you ask your slobby husband, you know, for your need. I'm doing that on purpose. You know, in the moment that you learn to ask for your need to be met, as opposed to labeling him as a slob, there's also a lot of God's love, for lack of a better word, that you're giving your husband. In that moment, you're actually honoring and respecting him as a person who is differentiated from you, to put it for lack of a better word, like that you are differentiated, you're not the same. He's not going to have the same level of cleanliness. And to see the other person as differentiated from you and having their own, you know, internal authority is like unconditional love. It's like God's love. So that, to me, it all kind of comes together. Does that make sense? A little bit, that from Valerie. Okay.
I believe we have time for one more question.
I don't see any more questions. So, oh wait, thank you very, very much, Renee. I'm happy to come and talk to you guys, you know, for longer if you want to actually start practicing some of these things. And it's fun. Like, I really want to be playful with it. You could even go home tonight and play with your husband, trying the drama way, you know, setting it up, saying, look, I want to try 2 different ways of talking to you. One way is going to be like exaggerated accusation and making you wrong and you're the problem. And then the other way is I'm going to come from a place of grace and responsibly own my own need for cleanliness. And I'm going to actually ask you from a place of like, and there's nothing wrong with you when you ask. Very, very important. You never start that conversation with going like, I know I'm, you know, OCD about cleanliness. No need to make yourself wrong. No need at all. You just say, I have a need for a certain level of cleanliness. In the bathroom, I'd like the toilet cleaned once a week. That's what I need. Do you think you can help me with that? Is that something you'd be, and you have to be willing to take an answer of no from the other person, by the way. Because if they say, no, it's not okay with me, I'm not going to clean that toilet once a week, then you have to start negotiating. But learning how to request a need responsibly and gracefully is a beautiful skill. Bonnie's hand is up again. Yes.
Can you comment? I know Eileen said only one more on negotiation. I mean, that's a whole, you know, 2
Right.
days.
Oh, well, people are, yeah. I was going to say people specialize in negotiating, being mediators, you know, to find a middle ground. I think that negotiation is a very interpersonal thing. You always keep out the word should, and take the word should, throw it out. Take the word appropriate, throw it out. Because that's part of what goes wrong in negotiation is people say, well, you should, or, you know, it's inappropriate for you to. And it's like, no, those words go away. And you simply say, this is what I need or want or desire. And then what do you need, want, and desire? And just like 2 businesses that are trying to, you know, do some transactional, you know, business, real business, it becomes transactional. Well, what if I did it once a week, you know, once every 2 weeks, etc. So yeah, it's hard being a human. But anyway, good luck. You can do it. Reach out to me if you have more questions.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
You're welcome, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
lovely day.
Thank you. Just great.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.